Bob Herbert's op-ed.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to op-ed.tv. America was once the envy of the world in terms of our standard of living, our vast, high-quality transportation networks, our unparalleled systems of public and higher education, and our commitment to freedom and democracy. It didn't matter whether Democrats or Republicans were in power. There were norms and principles and ideals to which nearly all of us subscribed. We were generally optimistic, and in those areas where we weren't doing too well, we tended to agree with Jack Kennedy that with hard work and in a spirit of cooperation, we could do better. That all seems a long time ago. What happened? How did it happen? And where are we now headed? I'll talk about this with my guest, Barry LePatner, an expert on infrastructure and development and a veteran analyst of power, politics, and government in the United States. Barry, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Bob. Good to be here with you.
I should also point out that you're a lawyer and the founder of the law firm LePatner and Associates, which specializes in construction and development issues.
That's right.
So we've got a lot to talk about. The period I was talking about when the United States was the envy of the world lasted from roughly the end of World War II into the 1970s. In a general sense, what happened to the United States since the 1970s that has caused us to fall short in actually several key areas? I'm thinking in terms of what's happened to the middle class, the education system, and so on.
We came out of World War II, and people sometimes forget that we entered World War II after a Great Depression,
Exactly.
which devastated our nation and its family way of life. But we came out victorious because Americans pulled together in a way that was unimaginable in the history of the world.
Right.
And then we rose to our greatest heights by deciding to generously help our enemies and our allies with programs overseas to help them get back to our feet. But most importantly, within the United States, we saw things happen over the next 3 or 4 decades that were incredible for our nation. We rebuilt our interstate highway system anew, which brought tremendous economic growth and new cities, new towns along the way. Of course, that helped the automobile industry become one of the greatest industries in the entire world. But we also built out major airports, major transit systems in Boston and Atlanta and New York. We saw the growth of a nation that prospered because everybody had respect, and we saw a rising middle class.
We also had to, what you're talking about are investments. We also had to build housing for all of these GIs that were coming back from the war, and we're starting families, and schools had to be built to educate the children of those families. There were tremendous investments across the board.
There was, and there was also a consciousness that all families were going to see with their children a rising tide that would make life better for them during the course of their lives, which in fact did happen for that boomer generation.
So what happened when we got to the 1970s, and I remember the oil shocks of the 1970s, but what has happened since the 1970s where we no longer have a commitment to the kinds of investments that you're talking about?
Well, beginning in the early 70s, the mindset of our Congress moved on to other things than building out our infrastructure and making those investments. The mindset of helping the middle class changed. The advent where unions had basically during that period of time had 1 in 5 workers in the United States were union workers. Today it's about 11%.
And those 1 in 5 help lift the wages and the working conditions for people who weren't in unions as well.
Yes. All of that rising tide almost seemed, in retrospect, to have come to a halt, because in the 40 years since those 1970s, what we've seen is that the middle class, number one, has shrunk. Back in the 70s, 57% of families in America were deemed to be in the middle class. Today, it's 45%. Back then, there was an anticipation of rising income that was going to raise the quality of our lives, and our kids could go to colleges that were reasonably cheap around the nation. Today, that middle class has seen hardly any increase in the standard of living as costs have risen.
And it's no longer assumed that the children of this generation will do better than their parents and their grandparents did.
Oh, all the studies today show that there's an expectation they won't.
Right.
Because what we've seen and hardly focused on, but it's become more relevant with every passing year, is that in order to grow as a family, in order to see your prospects be better, you have to accumulate something called wealth. It's not the wealth of the robber barons, but it's the wealth that said, I bought a home for 30 or 50,000 and I sold it for 80, and therefore I had extra money, or I could buy a better house and know that there's a rising tide of real estate values. That's gone.
I could invest in the affordable higher education for my kids, for example, which would help them have a better life going forward.
All parents felt that way in the 50s and 60s. That's gone today because I think the results of the Depression in the 1990s, the recession in the 1990s, the recession that occurred in 2000, 2001, and finally the Great Recession of 2008 stripped away a lot of the self-respect that many, many families had for themselves and for their future as workers.
One of the things that concerns me, though, is that there was the political change that said we can't make these investments, primarily investments by government, but not just by government, but by industry as well, but primarily by government. We can't make the investments in infrastructure, in housing, in education, in research and development, and that sort of thing that we did years ago. Now, you and I were talking a little bit about the future of America, and I was dutifully taking notes. And you mentioned a number of areas in which you personally are very concerned about the direction that we're going in. One, I'll just rattle off very quickly a few of them. One was the environment. One was the way we deliver health care in this country. One had to do with the fortunes of the middle class, which we've just been talking about. Also, what's happened to the labor force. So these are among the areas, and of course infrastructure, which we talk about all the time. But environment is not something that I've heard you talk about a lot, and it's not something that I think that, in the national conversation we hear enough about. So talk a little bit about your concerns when it comes to the environment.
I see environment through the lens of a growing nation that wants to grow, that wants to prosper. And on one level, I see us thinking about the need to improve our infrastructure and do the right thing in that area. And then I say, how can we rebuild our infrastructure when we have concerns that our environment is going to disappear on us, our ecology is going to disappear on us if we don't take steps to recognize what's happening? What I've understood from studying this is that America has always had a laissez-faire mindset.
Right.
We recognize that people are going to spend money and take risks and build and do those things, and that's a wonderful part of our country. But at the other hand, we also have the preservationists and the environmentalists who say we ought to protect and preserve the natural gifts in our country that we've been given, dating back to Teddy Roosevelt.
Right.
Well, that debate can go on. That's a fair debate. How do we balance that? Should go on. But what we should not have a debate over is what's happening to our ecology in terms of global warmth,
Right.
and the effects that we're seeing in a polar ice cap that's clearly melting, that's going to raise ocean waters, and essentially the science that says we are going to see major washouts to a good part of the East Coast.
Yep.
And we're going to see continuing disasters like happened in Houston and Puerto Rico and in Louisiana, along the
Exactly.
Gulf Coast.
We're already seeing the effects.
But we are not responding to those emergencies, which they are.
Right.
And I look at it and say, how can you plan new rail systems, new airports, new ports in all of these areas without taking into account that they may not be there in the next 50 and 100 years?
Right, not to mention the residential development along the coastal areas that are going to vanish, for example. So,
And I try to bring to people's attention interesting facts that cannot be ignored. As a world, we are destroying 10 million trees a year. And trees are not just beautiful, they don't just add to our landscape, they absorb the carbon monoxide we all breathe and turn it back into oxygen.
right.
And we live in a limited atmosphere. I look at the 687 pipe breaks, water pipe breaks every day in the United States, which lose 10 billion gallons of water a day.
Right.
And I look at the actions which are allowing industry to pump coal ash into streams and rivers and not believe it's going to impact millions of people to their health.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that we have to talk about as issues that are not deniable.
And what strikes me as really interesting when you talk about the environment and our ecology is if we made the investments and took the steps necessary to counter some of the worst effects, these investments would put all kinds of people to work. So if you were dealing with global warming and you worked hard at developing energy efficient vehicles, but not just vehicles, homes, buildings, businesses, I mean, you'd put people to work coast to coast. But we don't seem to have that kind of vision, and we don't do it.
Well, I can smile at that comment because it's so right for our current times. We are so absorbed with hearing every month that the unemployment rate is now down to 3.9%,
Right.
that we forget it's a function of a shrinking labor market. It's
Folks don't understand that. They look at that headline number and they go, oh my goodness, look how wonderful things are. But then they'll turn around, look in the mirror and say, wait, yeah, but why is my family struggling? But go ahead.
Yes, and the statistics show that that's not reflected in that number is the workers who have given up looking for jobs.
Right.
These are the people who lost their manufacturing jobs in the Great Recession, who need and should be retrained into new areas. Mm-hmm. But we have to remember that going back to the 1970s and 80s, we had a manufacturing output that was considered the world's wonder. Mm-hmm. Today, we manufacture twice as much goods as we did in the early 80s with 1/3 less workers.
Exactly.
And where did those workers go? They've been replaced by machines.
Right. People are worried always about globalization and low-wage foreign workers, which does have a significant impact on our workforce and the economy. But it's the mechanization that has taken over so many of the jobs and has had a much bigger impact on employment in this country.
Well, as Tom Friedman said a few months ago, he said, we haven't lost our jobs to Mexicans. We lost them to bits and bytes.
Exactly.
And that's what's running our factories.
And that's only going to increase. That's only going to continue.
And we're not spending the money on retraining. And retraining for digital jobs is really going to require higher educated people, which means we have to put more resources into our schools.
I've known you a long time. I've never asked you whether you were a Democrat or a Republican, and I'm not going to ask you now. This is not a political conversation. This is about what's going on in the United States. But you told me that you believe that America is fundamentally a centrist country. I'm a very liberal guy, but I'm also not nuts. I mean, so you have to come to some kind of common ground if you're going to make any kind of progress in a nation, or for that matter, in a state or a city or in a local school board. So how do we get to such a polarized situation where in so many cases the two sides can't even begin to deal with one another?
Well, we know how we got there. We got there when polarization in our Congress, in our federal governments, started back in the 80s when politicians decided that the other folks were the enemy.
Right.
The other folks were people we shouldn't even be socializing with. The other folks were people we shouldn't talk to, because until we have that attitude, we can't force into the general conversation our ideas which belong on one side or the other. And it was both sides who chose to take that attitude. And that loss of conversation in the middle has really hurt our nation. But the fail-safe to that polarization, this gridlock that we have today, is really that our nation has always responded when our country has shifted too far left or too far right by bringing it back into the middle in every situation. Because once we go too far to one extreme or the other, the middle that might have been swayed by the words or the fearful concerns that they have on one side or the other somehow starts to get leery about it and is looking for reasoned, rational discourse. The problem will be in this country whether we have leaders who rise to the level of being able to influence that discourse, or whether the political gridlock is just going to become calcified.
Do you have a sense at this particular moment whether we're moving in the kind of direction that you're talking about, which is essentially a course correction? Do you see any evidence of that or not?
Well, I believe this only happens when people come out and vote.
Right.
It doesn't happen when the vote level drops any further than what it is right now. We saw in the last 3 elections, we saw what happens when 5 million people vote in one election and don't show up to vote in the next election.
Exactly.
We saw in local elections, and people don't understand that local politics really counts. And I believe there is a sense, maybe it's because of the proliferation of all of the disputes we're having right now that covers so many different areas, from our concern about nuclear proliferation to concerns about racism to concerns about xenophobic concerns, that people are starting to pay attention. And that's only good. It doesn't matter what side you're on, because if you start to pay attention, you will sooner or later engage.
That's what I try to tell people. I've been speaking on college campuses and going around the country and talking a lot about voting. And I don't say, even though I'm a liberal, I don't say Democrats, you got to get to the polls, even though I think Democrats need to get to the polls. I just tell people, vote. Everybody ought to vote. It's a democracy. I would like to see voter registration. I'd like to see the rolls just get higher and higher and higher. I wouldn't pay attention to whether they were Republicans or Democrats or independents. Just get out there and vote. And you're right, we'll vote. The tendency is to vote in presidential elections, and then in the off-year elections, that turnout falls off a cliff.
I think we're going to be surprised this November that in many, many states, if not a majority of states, we're going to see the highest voter turnouts we've seen in many years or historically.
That'd be a great thing. So you were talking about what's happening in the labor market and what's happening to ordinary workers and families. And so if we're talking about the economy, we've recently had these enormous tax cuts. And along with the tax cuts, we've got budget deficits rising and rising and rising. And the areas that we've been discussing here during this program, one, we're talking about the investments that need to be made, but as budget deficits get higher and higher, it gets more and more difficult and unlikely that these investments will get made. And then on the other hand, you also mentioned the emergencies that we tend to face. We have these terrible storms, we have flooding, we have wildfires in the West. And, so what happens with these enormous budget deficits if we get a a terrific natural disaster, a huge natural disaster, or if there's an economic downturn and you don't have the money to make the investments to correct that downturn, or, God forbid, there's something as horrible as a terror attack.
Well, there's two things that I see here. One, I think whether you're a sober Republican or a sober Democrat, our nation will come to regret giving a $1.5 trillion tax gift to the major corporations and the 1%. Because what we've already started to see, unfortunately, is that 40% of the companies in the Standard & Poor's 500 index have decided to use that money to buy back their stock and are not doing anything meaningful for higher wages. What we're also seeing was that sucked the air out of any consideration for making investments in our infrastructure. Even the Trump administration officials have said that's been put off till next year, maybe. But it will probably be, as I've said a number of times, dead on arrival if every politician says, well, we can't increase the debt anymore. The reality is we may have to increase the debt to address some of the real problems, because the tariffs alone, based on what's happened during the Bush administration, where the same tariffs were imposed, 1 year had to be withdrawn because we lost 1 million jobs. These are the concerns now that are the repercussions of trying to deal with one base of support and forgetting that there are 90 other support bases that are going to, keep our government functioning on the right level.
Right. You mentioned the tariffs, and here I'm both baffled and not baffled. I mean, if you look at the bottom line and you look at the money that drives a lot of our leadership, then you can explain a great deal of what's going on. But if you look at the Republican Party, I've been covering this stuff for decades, and the Republican Party leaders always insisted that they were conservative, that you mentioned laissez-faire earlier in our program, that they were the party that was in favor of balanced budgets, that were not in favor of enormous budget deficits and that sort of thing. And it just strikes me that in terms of economic policy, the party has become anything but conservative. We've only got like a minute or so left, but can you give me a sense of what happened to the Republican Party somewhere along the line?
Well, they bought the reality show TV of the president and forgotten all the supportive tenets that really made the Republican Party an important part of our nation. They really were the kind of id of what the viewpoint of our founding fathers were in terms of protecting privacy, in terms of our country's balancing of budgets, our anti-Russian construct.
Hostile to the Russians, if ever anyone was hostile to anyone, but anyway.
Yes, but there's a whole litany of that. But it's been lost, and it's almost unfair to call the Republican Party today the same as the Republican Party of yesteryear.
It's not recognizable.
And so we have to understand that there's going to be alliances forming now that are going to address the future of our country, that I believe are going to lead us back onto a steady path to the center.
Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed. Barry, we're out of time. I wish we had more. Barry LePatner, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Bob, always.
We'll be back in a moment with a final word. The Trump presidency is a national emergency. The president's policies have understandably alarmed our closest allies and made our country a laughingstock in much of the world. What is worse is the devastation Trump has brought to some of our most cherished values here at home, to the very ideals that made America a beacon to the rest of the world. He has repeatedly demonstrated his contempt for the rule of law. He has stoked the fires of bigotry at every opportunity. He has accused the press, a cornerstone of American democracy and freedom, of being, quote, the real enemy of the people. I'll take that personally. I've been a member of the press for nearly half a century, and I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I don't need a draft-dodging Putin puppet lecturing me on who the enemy is. There is only one antidote to the catastrophe that we as a society are now facing. You must vote. At every opportunity in federal, state, and local elections, vote. What's happening to America under Donald Trump is intolerable. History will record it as a period of sheer madness and utterly vile. Put a stop to it. Insist that your relatives, friends, colleagues, and casual acquaintances vote. Volunteer for voter registration drives and get out the vote campaigns. This is not business as usual. It's not a small matter. The future of America as we've known it is at risk. Vote. That's all for now. See you next time.